Good afternoon. I wanted to put up a video on shadow work because it's something that's really important to me. In the yoga world, which is what I'm a part of, there's a lot of love and light, and everything should be love and light, and let's focus on positive thinking. And there's nothing wrong with positive thinking. There's nothing wrong with looking on the bright side of things. But it's just that sometimes things aren't always positive. And sometimes when you have a difficult aspect in your life or something that's happening and you just try and remain positive, one, not only could you be completely delusional about it and not be facing the real issue so that you can solve it, but two, you're stuffing something down into your shadow aspect. And so the shadow has two parts to it. There's the quote unquote bad stuff that you stuff into the shadow. There's like anger, resentment, that kind of stuff that we call negative. And then there's also the gold that you stuff in the shadow. Like maybe when you were a child and you were extremely outgoing, but your parents told you that little girls shouldn't be outgoing like that, and that you should be quiet, and that you need to wear dresses and have bows in your hair. And so you take those aspects of yourself, maybe those masculine aspects if you're a female, and you stuff them down into your shadow, and then it doesn't present itself until later. And so Carl Jung says that we spend the first part of our life building our shadow. It's going to happen. There's nothing that you can do about it. You're going to experience traumas, and they don't have to be excessive traumas. When I watch my 2-year-old flipping out over not getting a toy, that's a trauma to her. That is something that it's going to create her shadow. There's also big traumas, abuse, drugs, neglect, but a trauma doesn't have to be that bad. And then with the other part of the shadow, the stuff that you're stuffing down, that can be things like, for example, and I use astrology a lot. Sometimes I look at my birth chart and I think, that's not me. So I'll look at my birth chart, right? And I'm a Gemini, and Mercury's big in my birth chart. And so I'm supposed to be like really good at communicating with people. And I'm supposed to be like a really good public speaker. And I should be good at sales, but I don't see that in myself. And so I'm doing a lot of work on myself to figure out, okay, like where is that coming from? Because there are certain times, like if I'm teaching a yoga class in front of a lot of people, where at first I'm like, oh shit, I can't do this. And then I do it, and I realize, wow, okay, I am good at this. I am good at like diplomacy and speaking in front of people and teaching people. Sometimes I read that in my birth chart, I'm supposed to be a great teacher, and it's like, I don't think I'm teaching anybody shit. But that's the stuff that somewhere along the line in my childhood, I stuffed it down, right? And so there's that gold in our shadow that we don't necessarily, we're not able to see. We're afraid to see it. Maybe we grew up in a multi-child household and we were afraid to outshine somebody. Maybe we had a sibling who outshined us. And so what we had to shine, our parents weren't seeing. And so we just stuffed it down. So to me, in the yoga community, all of the like love and light and everything's great. Sometimes I wonder when I see teachers like that, like, but what's your dark aspect? Okay, what are you not recognizing? Or maybe they just have a different disposition than me, and there's nothing wrong with that either. My disposition tends to run towards the negative, and I can admit that now, as a 36-year-old woman, that I work on that a lot. But I think it's important that we bring these things to light, and Carl Jung talks about that. Like, he talks about how the light and the dark want to integrate. And so what we do is we split ourselves into like different people, into like different personalities to fit in and to survive. It's what we have to do. And so that's why you might be one way when you're with people that you're super comfortable with, and then you're another way as if trying to fit in and survive if you're in with a group that you don't necessarily know. And you get to a point in your life where that fucking sucks. and you almost have to accept, like, okay, I need to not be accepted by some people, and that's okay. Because what the shadow aspects want to do is they want to integrate. So for example, somebody who maybe is always positive and always trying to look at the bright side of things, they may have a breakdown in a few different ways. They may break down by one day snapping, going crazy. I heard an awful story about a mother of 4 children, and she killed them all in her apartment one summer. And I can just imagine, as a mom, just snapping. You know, all the screaming, all the crying, all the needing. And everybody was saying what a loving mother she was, but she snapped, right? Because there was some shadow aspect of herself that she was stuffing down, and it came out because it had to come out. Now that's a really extreme example. Sometimes we stuff things down so much that they can make us physically sick. Or sometimes, as with me, like, I get really irritable about things. Certain people will irritate me, and then sometimes when I think, okay, Erica, like, go through this, like, figure out what this is, and I actually talk to the person, I actually realize I actually like talking to this person. I don't need to avoid them. They're not that irritating. And the irritation that I'm bumping up against is something in my shadow, right? And so it's that whole thinking of, you spot it, you got it. So it's good for us to look at that stuff, to look at the things, even people who we quote unquote don't like, which I think it's totally fine not to like people. I think it's fine if people have hurt you, or if, you know, they stress you out, or if they fucking irritate you and you've done everything you can for them to not irritate you, just to say to yourself, like, you irritate me. That, you know, and I think it's okay to accept, like, that you might not like people, but maybe have some compassion, because you might be that irritating person to someone else. Maybe you've hurt people before too, right? And so this is where we're all one and the same. We're all unique in our personalities and in our preferences and all these ego ideals, but we're all the same in that we all have this dark aspect. It's really easy to blame the other, and that's a shadow aspect too. You made me feel this way. You know, what you said hurt my feelings, or you really offended me, but they didn't do that to you, because you have every right to brush it off. I had every right growing up when I was getting made fun of to just not let it affect me. And that's the thing, when you're made fun of, maybe in your teen years or in your childhood years or something, that's also stuff that you stuff in the shadow. And so it's really important to recognize that. And so just knowing, circling back, Carl Jung says that we spend the first half of our life creating our shadow. It's going to happen. Like, even if you're the most loving parent, you're going to create a shadow aspect on your child, unintentionally, unwillfully. You don't mean to, but it's going to happen. You can't, even if it's your child, like, they're still like their own separate entity of a person, and you can't predict how they're going to take things. And then we spend the last half of our life unfolding the shadow and realizing what's inside of it. And so at 36, I am considered midlife at this point. And so it's really interesting to start accepting different parts of myself and taking these split personalities that I've disassociated and just melding them and kind of putting myself out there like this and saying, yeah, this is the shit I'm into. I've been reading on Carl Jung for about a decade, since right before I got into yoga. And Carl Jung he loved Kundalini yoga. He studied it. And I think that it's really important, especially as yogis, that we look at the darker aspects of ourselves. Really look at it. Like, I don't think that you can necessarily teach yoga if you're not really looking at that dark aspect of yourself, and if you're constantly just portraying like this image of being this positive, happy, everything's great and light yogi. Like, life's dark and muddy sometimes, and icky, and sometimes we have to work through that. So I didn't write anything down that I was going to say today, so hopefully I got everything I wanted to say out about the shadow. I'm reading the book Romancing the Shadow by Connie, something with a Z, can't pronounce the last name. And it's really eye-opening. It's really been a lot of integration. And then Teal Swan has a lot of really good videos out there too that kind of talk about the shadow. So maybe do a little journaling exercise and see what's in there. Write down the things that trigger you, because those things that trigger you are your aspects that you're bumping up against that shadow. That's the shit you have to look at. That's the shit. That's the shadow shining that light and saying, hey, look at this. Integrate it. It's the only way we're gonna find happiness. So, namaste. Thank you. And post in the comments, like, whatever.